Hello everyone, welcome to the Tech Podcast series. This is Lakshit Pant from Azure Developer Community, and we have started this initiative Tech Podcast series to inculcate, to discuss with, and to have a conversion with multiple tech founders, managing directors, startup founders, and and all these entrepreneurs who are trying to build their idea, who are trying to bring a revolution, who are trying to inculcate their idea into the Indian ecosystem or maybe the global ecosystem. And for the same, we have here with us Pradeep sir here, and he's a founding member of Dhiway, and today Dhiway is a engineering. So he is a leading provider of Web 3.0 technologies, and I assume you all have been hearing around the Web 3.0 because it's been a buzzword since 2019. So first of all, I would like, KP sir, if you could introduce yourself first.
Hi, like I said, my name is Pradeep, and our company is Dhiway Networks. We are 4 founders and one of the co-founders of the company. And we started in 2019. By way of background, I am a chartered accountant and a cost accountant to boot. I've had a fairly long stint in industry. I'm a new convert possibly into the tech world and into the world of startups. But I think 3-4 years is a long time, I guess, in startups. But having said that, I think it's been a wonderful transition for me and a huge amount of learning as I passed through this along with my co-founders. A lot of learning, I should say. But that's my background. Yeah, I've been in industry for a long time, done at least 8-9 different types of industries, largely been into business, finance, operations, strategy, and the whole works. I mean, I've been into a lot of listed entities. I've worked in India and abroad, and so that's my background.
Yeah, thank you for that kind introduction, sir. And if you have mentioned so many things, we will try to touch upon the finance part as well, because I really want to enhance or enlighten myself with the finance knowledge of the market. So starting from the so my first question starts from about the blockchain space. If you could explain blockchain in the layman terms for our generic audience, it would be really helpful, sir.
So let me try and make it as simple as possible. Though the tech behind it is a little complicated, the actual philosophy around blockchain is very simple. It tells you the last state of matter. It tells you in a very easy fashion at the front end the capability to understand the underlying assertion that's made in the context of a transaction. So let me be a little more simple when I say this. So let's say I'm a chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and I make an assertion that, hey, I'm a chartered accountant. There's somebody on the other side who's relying on the assertion and basis that doing a set of actions. What we do is that we ensure, the blockchain actually ensures that when I make that assertion, by virtue of the technology, we ensure that that assertion cannot be altered by me who makes it. It's a machine-based understanding of the assertion. And very importantly, this assertion is globally verifiable and doesn't need to come back to any other entity which even issued the credential for it to be validated. So the nearest I can take, and for everybody to understand very simply, is that in a typical credit card transaction, you have an issuer, let's say it's a bank, you have the holder, who is the consequence of having asked the bank for a credit card. I go to a shop and I swipe it. And neither the holder nor the issuer or the verifier at the POS is material to the transaction going through. And the person who is there's a master or a Visa or any other entity who's arbitrating trust right at the center of the transaction, right? And that is a very simple credit card based interaction. But in real life, especially after COVID, a lot of your interactions are digital. You're making a lot of assertions all the time. How is it that somebody on the other side should even believe what you're saying is true? This technology ensures that you can transcend this in a very simple and easy way.
So, sir, because I just wanted to break this myth at the starting of this podcast, because when we say blockchain, most of the, maybe if I'm not wrong, the student audience try to connect blockchain plus crypto all together, right? But there are two different things that are happening at the same time that has been introduced, because in lockdown people has to, all the time people need new toys, right? So that's why the new, the different two things got inculcated in the one, or maybe, we can say. So I just want, if you could throw some lights up on this.
So it's a very, very interesting question because I get asked this question at various times. See, one of the things that we should understand is that when you talk about cryptos, there is a certain history in which the whole concept of a crypto came about, right? They were
Okay.
essentially banking and financial transactions holding value that was transacted through a medium of a particular type of a currency, which they call a crypto. And
Okay.
the advantage or the disadvantage of a crypto is that one, while that interaction is taking place between entities who may not necessarily be on what's called a statutory platform, right? It's a platform in which, I can send you some coins and you can send me some coins, and there's a machine out there who's accounting for it, but very importantly is making the reliability of trust between our interactions, right?
Right.
So that was a set of ledgers which were simply created for exchange of value with trust as the background. It had no large involvement of nation states behind it or anything like that. Because if you have simple currency, you would try to transact it based on nation states providing their reliability and trust behind the currency, right? If today a US dollar is being used, there's a Fed behind it, there's a government behind it. But here is essentially a set of networks that are actually arbitrating this trust because the network feels that the interaction between members of that network itself is in a manner of trust and therefore shouldn't have to have a regulatory overhang or a bearing. I don't have
Okay.
any particular views on it and I don't even want to comment about it. But
Yes.
that was one side of how this whole crypto story started. We always euphemistically refer to it as tail wagging the dog. Actually, it's the use case that actually should drive the demand for tokens
Exactly.
because what is a token used for? It's used for building integrity of a blockchain transaction. So those
Hmm.
tokens will have to be used for a blockchain to work in the
Hmm.
technical sense. Now, it just happens that if you take that token and start listing it, it starts connoting a very different set of behaviors, right? And at some point of time, the token becomes more important than the actual use case, which drives the importance of the token. Therefore, we always say this is a concept of the tail wagging the dog. Actually, the dog should wag the tail. Now, what we did, I'm again relating to what we did because we went ahead and created what's called a tokenless blockchain. What does that
Okay.
mean? It means that, guys, we don't require your token to actually build integrity on the chain. We'll transact with you in simple fiat currency. It did a couple of things. One, it removed the distraction from cryptos because the blockchain has a humongous amount of capabilities which can deliver a humongous amount of value in real world, real life interactions, right? And somewhere there was a distraction around crypto that tended to move the message away from the real world use case. So we call ourselves one of the first world's tokenless blockchain because we don't believe that we need a crypto to run this. We believe in the use case will run it, and we very strongly believe that we need to build adoption based on use cases, not based on a capability of coins or cryptos. I'm not saying one is right or the other is wrong. In the sort of view that we have, we believe that we should concentrate more on the use cases. We need to deliver value at the point of the interaction of the blockchain with real world use cases.
Absolutely,
Does
I
that
totally,
make sense?
yeah, yeah, yes, absolutely, and I 100%, maybe 200%, I agree with your point that you have just illustrated right over here. I have been working in this industry, in the metaverse industry, for I have been not specifically AR industry, I should say, so in Instagram filters and all these filters. I've
Right.
been teaching people about those. So people were having this myth. So why that metaverse industry didn't survive? I feel because the use case was not defined, right? That's enjoyment is a different perspective and use case is very different. So no one, even not even Meta, I believe even not Meta, just defined the use case of that metaverse. So similarly, you really mentioned it very clearly. Use case is very much important now, and I would really love to know, explore with from you, like how the Dhiway and you all are building the, you know, tokenless blockchain, if you could enhance over the solutions that you are providing. I'll touch upon that later, but first of all, I have one follow-up question. So when we talk about transaction, when we talk about currency, there is a huge, or maybe I should say 90 to 95% government involvement entity every time. So government transaction often involve multiple parties and complex processes. How can blockchain enhance transparency or maybe efficiency, or the most important part is trust in government dealings, or maybe not even government dealings, how government sees this tokenless blockchain ultimately benefiting citizens and public organizations here in India?
Very, very, very interesting question, and I would, urge you all to go through our site, where there's a very interesting article written by one of our advisory board members in the context of a bureaucracy of a billion. Right?
Okay.
Bureaucracy for a billion. Billion is the name of the piece, but it's a very interesting piece, and I would like to refer to some of it when I actually answer your question. When one of the biggest problems that government has, and it has nothing to do with government wantedly acting in a particular fashion which is suboptimal. They really also are grappling with the problem as much as everybody else is. The bureaucracy that was created for, let us say, 200 million people, today we're sitting at 1,500 million people. Bureaucracy
Exactly.
hasn't changed much. Therefore, what is happening? The government is the largest provider of services in the country, and all governments are. I mean, and whether you like it or not, the citizen expects services from the government. Now, that's a mindset. We always think we need to go stand in front of a government building to get a service. Now, how can all that change with a blockchain? Let's imagine a scenario where your mobility of data, the government is the largest custodian of data. You're aware about it. They issue your Aadhaar. Yeah, once they issue it, they are custodians. But once they issue it, you're the owner of the data, which means you will have your Aadhaar is yours. You can decide whether to share it basis as per your data privacy. But the minute it's issued, what happens to that proof? It actually gets a lot of mobility when it comes to a blockchain. Its capability to be shared, frictionless interaction, the capability to be globally verifiable. These are all what is called at the back end the bulwark of how the technology can be used to create a situation in which government services can go right across to the people. So
Exactly.
I envisage a situation in, let's say, 5, 10 years time, or maybe even shorter, when I can actually, based on the fact that I have a mobile, I can I can tell the government that I'm vulnerable, and the government will come to me and provide the service at my doorstep. It is possible because the technology has created that capability, right? For example, today, let's say I'm in Bangalore, I'm in Karnataka. The government has got a huge service called Sakala, right? The Sakala is a way in which it's a government service, whether you ask for a particular type of caste certificate, X, Y, Z, a revenue based certificate, anything you go through a Sakala services. The whole thing can actually be run out of your cell phone, the whole services. And from that standpoint, if you were to share any of those certificates with any other government stroke non-government departments through the blockchain, it can be shared seamlessly in a way in which me, Pradeep, the holder of my own certificate, cannot touch it, meaning cannot fudge it. And that's the greatest claim of capability of authenticity and provenance. And so, what happens at every point of time? You don't need to go to a government building. I mean, in terms of locationally, you don't need to go ahead and ask for it. It comes to you. Second, you don't need to be constrained by time, because otherwise, you have a government department that works morning 10 to evening 5. You're not constrained by time. It's
Exactly.
efficient at cost because people don't realize the number of times the citizens of this country take a public transport or a private transport and go to government and demand the most simplest of services. You are going completely green because that service is available to you at your doorstep. I think any government, and I'm sure all governments, want to keep services to citizenry at the center of their, at center of their, I should say, what is called the most important capability. Because I go with the logic that every government wants to do good for its citizens. Every government
Exactly.
wants to ensure that its citizens don't need to, keep demanding that they want X or Y service. And I need to do it in the most efficient way. And I need to get it to the citizens at the lowest cost. Therefore, this is all addressed through this technology. It's just that the governments need to open up a little bit and understand the scope and scale, put in their safeguards because it's important. At the end of the day, those are governments and they are for the people and they will have safeguards. But this can address all of that. And so it's a huge capability out there. We should use it.
True, and so the government, if you will see what government has done with the with the rise of UPI, if you will say that the government has built that ecosystem, right, and in the currency exchange. So now UPI has and grows much bigger. Now we are expanding to other countries as well. According to recent announcements. So the government role is very crucial, and the making it very easy and simplified for everyone, like the UPI Lite that they are introducing now. Okay, and so now if we are talking about this, I want to really know the if you could shed some light upon the e-rupee concept that they are recently introduced, or maybe they are just making some new announcements. So as a CA, how do you see this e-rupee concept?
See, I will see it in the larger context of central banking digital currency, right? As a CBDC. So it's not that an e-rupee is very different from any electronic transfers happening today. There is
Correct.
one main difference that the money becomes what's called curated, which means
Hmm.
if let's say if the government was directing money to a particular use, let's say the subsidy is given for agriculture, the person
Hmm.
receiving the subsidy should be incapable of using it for, let's say, building his house.
Exactly.
Second, very important, he should not be able to use the money whenever he wants because there is a time frame for which this is given, right?
Hmm.
And third, very importantly, the government has complete control over the amount of liquidity in that system.
Exactly.
And fourth, very importantly, if you're curating it, the government can also put what's called a timestamp, which means if you don't use that money in that time, I'm sorry guys, you didn't want it, it's expired,
Exactly.
right? And so
Right.
if all this are curated into what I call a powerful instrument, and there is nothing wrong in the sense that the government is ensuring at the end of the day, you're given something to achieve certain objectives. Do it within the time frame required. We will be the happiest. And therefore,
Hmm.
I'm a great fan of this concept. I think it works very closely with a blockchain at the background. And I
Yeah.
think it's one of those very far reaching capabilities that the government has introduced. But it's not new. The curation is new. The concept is actually an old concept. The
Yeah.
curation and the way it's purposed is what makes the difference.
So as UPI is open source, right? So I have seen a basic architecture that they have published. So yeah, definitely it works on the blockchain thing, but that is far more different from the but people were when it was launched, people were saying there is this is new cryptocurrency introduced by Indian government and so and so. But these are all are myths. It's more like the government gave a direction. If you have a use case, you should use this. Otherwise, there is nothing that. So maybe that can lead to a that can decrease the corruption level and multiple things if you will see in a broader aspect, and that is very useful use case of a
See,
in a
I
digital
won't use the word. I won't use the word corruption. I will use the word. It increases the efficiency of the decision, which means that when I say I'm going to do something with X, I am presuming there's something in economics called the incremental capital output ratio, right? When you put money into something, you'd expect the money to realize and to lead to further credit in that system that can help realize the potential of money that's dropped in the system. It helps in efficiencies there. And very importantly, when you start getting to the point of a CBDC, sometimes, and this is something that may happen in the future, you don't really need a central arbitrator to transact currency between two people, especially when the
exactly.
money is curated. So you're now removing a central authority that's required to arbitrate the transaction. And so underlying there is something that the banks must start realizing because it could change the way banking is done in another 4 5 years. These are a very far reaching philosophies. And I don't think people have still realized how deep the story is. But it could change completely the way you deal and work with payments, e-commerce, and transactions going forward.
Exactly, and if you remove one aggregator or one vendor in between, definitely the number of hops are decreased. So, the transaction are so the cost cut and everything will decrease, right? So that's a very scalable model, like I believe. So now looking ahead, so India is witnessing right extensible surge in tech startups. So how can So now I'm just more focusing on the solution that Dhiway provide. I just wanted to know how can Dhiway solution, blockchain solutions, support these startups in scaling their operations, or maybe ensuring data security or building trust with their customers.
Just to explain Dhiway in a couple of minutes, we have a very interesting platform, a layer one blockchain platform called the Quad, and we have an application which is a verifiable digital credentialing application built on this platform, right? And in the case of the platform, we have just announced the version 2, which is the SparkNet, which is meant for developers to develop on code, right?
Okay.
We are getting into, and it's open source. We are standing out there asking all developers to come on it, build on it, because the capabilities are huge, and your ability to take on that network and to build network effects basis, that is very huge. And so that is out in the open, and we are coming out with some announcements very shortly about tie-ups with some larger entities in this space who are maybe cloud providers, and helping developers to gain an easy access to start developing on code and to start seeing the benefits of being able to build their applications on code. And so that's something that we do all the time in this space. From the standpoint of an application, of course, I mean, we've been out in various forums talking about the platform and the application itself. And I should say we've been receiving very interesting responses from various sides about because one thing, it's a very interesting experiment stroke development for India. This is one of the first blockchains built by Indians at global scale for the world. It's come out of our stable, so we're very patriotic about this in one way, because we are sitting out there, and we are well up there, and we have very large interactions. I mean, some of the interactions we are having on digital commerce, we're having on digital payments, skills, workplace, education. We work closely with the models around OnNest, which is just recently announced. We work closely with the ONDC. We have some work going on with the NPCI, and very happy to be working with all of them in this space to create the right ambience for what is coming out to be a large national network. We're very happy to be a part of this.
Yeah, that's nice. So, and recently I did, so in the former podcast that I did with one of the cybersecurity leader, Zakir sir, he mentioned an incredible point, and that's what my next question is all about the learning perspective, right? So, India, if we will see looking like 2 3 years ahead, blockchain technology is still in the very early stages, right? And adoption can vary across industries to industry, right? It can definitely. So what role does you see it playing in educating and raising awareness about the benefits, about the potential use cases of blockchain, or maybe I should say tokenless blockchain for businesses here in India?
I can talk from my co-founders too here, because that's all we do all the time, evangelizing the blockchain, its benefits, and like I said, we've got five very distinct areas that we actually talk about, which includes digital payments, digital commerce, skills, workplace, and education. Is areas which we concentrate on. But you know, uh, the, while the philosophy of the blockchain is very simple, it addresses every industry that we can think about. I mean, I've just finished a very interesting conversation this morning with an agri-tech startup, which is very prominent in the agri-tech space, and looking at, and we announced this a couple of weeks ago formally, and they're looking at using the blockchain as a provenance-based capability for their application. It
Okay.
sends a very powerful message. When you look at agri-tech, there's telemedicine people that we are talking to. There's carbon credit potential people that we are talking to. Lot of industries. Every one of these industries have their own use cases capable of getting on the chain, and this evangelizing has been going on from 2019, so it's not today. And I should say, at least from what I've seen of the past, I don't think anyone finds it difficult to understand what the blockchain is. They have a fairly good idea. It's a little confused with crypto sometimes, but that's part of our education process. But they are open to seeing a change, but it's always where will you make that first change? I mean, if things was fine, I need to actually come, let's say for education, for example. I'm giving one use case. I have to actually go and tell people there is a problem and tell them what the problem is and tell them our solution is a solution for that. Now it's very interesting because let's take a certificate which a student actually has misused. Nobody remembers the name of the student. They only remember the name of the institution. And so the institutional credibility is very huge. Just one use case I'm talking about. And therefore, there is a huge push from issuers to have to come onto this chain. The government has provided not a mandate, but a loose set of instructions which they believe people have to follow in terms of how they are positioning themselves for digital credentials of the future. Templates are out. We have uh, we have a lot of pioneering work being done by the backend FIDE people. We have a lot of pioneering work being done by XCHEP. We have work around NSDC has been doing a lot of work around this. So we have a lot of work being done by specific agencies to try and bring this out in a much easier way out to the general public. I think that the time is now, and I think the process has already started. It's just a
Okay.
matter of the adoption and the speed of adoption. It will be quick. I think
Uh,
24 will be a very defining year for the blockchain industry.
So now we are reaching to the end of this podcast, but I really want to highlight this point a little bit more. The UN Sustainable Development, the goals, the SDGs that we say are very crucial and creating a sustainable future, right? And when we say India has been a very you like the kind of population that we have here in India is immense. So and the blockchain, along with the blockchain concept, when we talk about tokenization and everything, there is a concept of carbon footprinting that really increases with the development of blockchain, because there is mining, there are there are processors, there are compute, a huge compute is required to mine all those tokens, right? So but now, as you see, as you have mentioned, you are tokenless, so that is a well play a major role, and I guess that's a great differentiation between other blockchain providers. That's what my perception is. So how does Dhiway align with its vision and solution with this tokenless blockchain, with all the sustainable development to contribute in someone says in a positively to a societal or maybe environmental progress in India?
Because our processes don't involve mining. Firstly, we are green ourselves in that sense,
Yes.
right? I mean, we
Yes.
are tokenless too, and SDG is a very big area of focus. Like
Hmm.
I said, we to the extent that we can, we've got all the SDG 17 sectors out there, but
Okay.
we have constraints in terms of how much of bandwidth and how much of time we have, and so areas where we, as I told you, concentrate on all part of the SDG. A very important area is identity, and
Okay.
I think there's going to be a lot of work around identity, providing mobility to identity, and being
Okay.
able to create a lot of offshoot network capabilities around identity. And and again, because of identity being a government led thing, the custodian is still the government, but the network impacts of all of these are very huge. I think it's a it's an interesting time with the SDG goals out there and our capability to actually use the blockchain in each of these goals. And on another session, I can talk to each of these goals and then how the blockchain can be used. Just this again, this yesterday we were having this carbon credit discussion and about how the agri sector by 2030 many of the industries have to go neutral on carbon, for example,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
I'm talking with the SDG goals in mind. Some of them, and generally aviation will end up actually buying the credits, right? Because beyond a point you can't go green in aviation, you'll have to burn fuel, and so there's going to be an offset. So credits will be bought, but how are the credits generated? Whether the provenance attached to the generation gives a semblance of one, provenance is giving you the semblance of respectability in terms of, yes, I know this is true data. I'm not, it's immutable, which means it's incapable of being tampered. And very importantly, the solution to global verifiability, when I say it's a very simple word, but at any point of time, this can be verified on any format that you're talking about, is a huge amount of capability around that. And if you take carbon credit as an instrument and its capability to be used, it's a very large use case for. I'm talking about one thing. Huh? Like this,
Hmm.
there are so many SDG related aspects. It's a very long discussion. But like I said, the philosophy of the blockchain is extremely simple. the way you purpose it, the way you curate it is exactly where the whole story lies. We're very confident this year will be a very important year for blockchain. And in passing, I'd just like to mention there's so much of talk about AI and ML today. There's so much of
Yes.
talk. But let me tell you something. I think unless you get the substratum of data correct, what comes out of AI and ML may not be very consistent. So I think there is a requirement to ensure that what you're seeing at the substratum is true, provenance established. Therefore, results that come out of that will be a lot more legitimate when AI and ML talk about it. So I think we have to put the horse before the cart or cart before the horse is something that
Yeah,
we have to figure out very clearly when we
exactly.
are building these new technologies. So that's where we are. I mean, yeah, I think this is a very, very important year this year.
Yeah, definitely, sir. Thank you. And this podcast has been really insightful for me as well. In every sense, I got to learn a lot more things, so many things from you. So now we have, because of the time constraint, I really want to discuss. I have a couple of questions with me. Definitely, I really want to discuss those, but due to paucity of time, we have to end this podcast here. But would really definitely love to catch up sometime later and talk about this more, the sustainable development and about the blockchain part. So, sir, thank you for joining this podcast and taking your time to record this with us, sir. It was really nice hosting you, sir.
Thank you so much and pleasure. Thanks for your time and wish all your viewers the very best. And feel free to reach out to us anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.